Ben Emerson kindly requests that you talk about two specific topics.
Yes.
Medieval Catholic guilds and King Alfred the Great of England.
Okay, well, I'm glad you asked kindly. You know, if he'd gotten nasty and thrown something, that wouldn't have been helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's take them in order. The guilds. These were great. I mean, the whole medieval guild idea was a really tremendous thing. Basically, the guilds regulated specific trades, or those are artisan or craftsman guilds, or they regulated trade in general. Those were merchant guilds. What they all had in common was that they regulated a given industry, and they supported the people who practiced it. So, and there were several different facets to it. So, firstly, let's say you wanted to be a candle maker. Okay, now usually it would help if your dad had been a candle maker before you, but one way or the other, you would be apprenticed by the guild. The guild would apprentice you to a candle maker. Then you'd become what was called a journeyman after you learn the trade up to a certain point. And then finally you'd produce what was called your masterpiece, or your masterwork.
Mm.
The guild would judge that and determine whether you had in fact reached a sufficient skill level to be admitted as a full member of the guild. And of course, to sell candles or make them in that town, you'd have to be a member of that guild. But that was only one part of it. There was more. The guild also took the place of an insurance company. So let's say you died.
Mm-hmm.
You're a paid-up member of the guild. Well, your wife, your widow, well, you're buried at their expense. And your wife and children get the equivalent of insurance support until the children come of age. So that was the second part of it. But wait, there's more.
Okay.
It was also it also had a very strongly religious aspect, in the sense that the guild would be devoted to the patron saint of the trade. Every trade has a patron saint.
Right.
You know, St. Crispin for the cobblers and people like that. They very often either had a chapel of their own, or they would endow a side chapel in the church or cathedral. They would have on the annual feast day, they would have a mass and a celebration. And sometimes for some of the major feasts, like Corpus Christi, they might sponsor a play. And in processions like that, you've got to imagine, in addition to the more normal thing, we've got to play at a fixed location. In some of the processions, they would have these sort of floats, wagons. And on the wagon, a play would be going on during the course of the procession.
Wow.
And this was an amazing thing. But anyway, the guild handled all that kind of stuff. They survived in Catholic Europe until the French Revolution. Some of them, a few of them, reworked, survive in France and Italy and Spain today. But where they really held out, of all places, were England and Switzerland, where they kind of desiccated but survived, and now they're kind of elite organizations, especially the so-called livery companies of London, of the little square mile in the middle of town, the square mile they call it, the city. The guilds still have their churches there and play a big part in the governance of the city, because that was the fourth element of guild life, which was they often played a role in governing the city they were in.
Mm.
So you remember that what made a town in those days was being at a confluence of trade routes, having an annual fair, a weekly market. And trade and crafts were a big part of a town's survival. A city was different from a town because a city would have a bishop than a cathedral. That's what made a city status. But in either case, the craft and the merchant guilds very often had a large part in the governing of the town. In a lot of places they chose the mayor. I mean together as a group, not individually. And then of course in some towns there was sort of a running fight between the guilds, the town nobility or patricians, and the bishop and all that. But that's now in the latter part of the 19th century, a gentleman called Arthur Penty invented something called guild socialism, which looked to adopt the guild system to modern economy. He was a great friend of Chesterton and Belloc and all that, and guild socialism later ended up closely connected to distributism and all that sort of thing. But anyway, those are the guilds.
So you said merchant guild? There's a merchant
Yeah,
guild? Like, what would be your masterpiece in a merchant guild?
Oh, I really couldn't tell you. I know the craft guilds better, but obviously they had some criteria for full membership. What it is, I couldn't tell you offhand.
Okay, what about hunters and farmers? Did they have guilds?
Of sorts. Well, I mean, see, it's important to bear in mind that guilds were one kind of confraternity.
Okay.
And there were tons of confraternities, brotherhoods.
Right.
They had them for every... The way things were in those days is if you had a particular task that needed to get done, you'd form a fraternity, a brotherhood to do it. So they had bridge building brotherhoods. You know, we've been, for years and years and years, we've been putting up with a ferry at this point. We need a bridge.
Yeah.
So you would form a brotherhood under St. Julian or St. Benezet or somebody like that, and you build a bridge. And that was what you did. In certain places, they had brotherhoods whose sole responsibility was protecting stretches of the highway from robbers. And in Spain, they call those the Santa Hermandades, the Holy Brotherhoods. You had others that were purely religious. You know, they would process on, and some of those still existed in Spain and Latin America and elsewhere, who would process in Eastern Europe. I'm sorry, gosh, I don't know where my mind is today. They would process in Holy Week and Easter and so forth. You had hunting fraternities and farmers fraternities.
Oh, okay.
But these are all, it's important to understand that these are all part of the same basic phenomenon. In medieval society, if you wanted to get something done, you got a group together under the patronage of a saint, and you went to work and you did it. Now you notice how much direction came from the capital. Oh yeah, that's right, none. Because they were very, very much more aware than we are of a reality of life, which is that most of your living takes place on the local sphere. The equivalent, let's say like here in this town, you decided that there was a wilderness area that's just been trashed up. I say this because I know there is one like
Right,
that.
yeah.
Well, okay. You would have formed, say, a Brotherhood of St. Hubert, the patron of hunters. And the members would swear to gather, you know, once a year you gather on St. Hubert's Day and have the Mass and all that and a banquet. You do some other things. But you devote X number of days a year to cleaning that place up. Now, would the order come from the mayor to do this? No. What about the provincial governor? No. How about the king himself? No. No. When locals were sufficiently aware of the space around them, that when they saw a problem, they got to work and took care of it. Fortunately, we've escaped all that.
Yeah. Well, this is California, so I'm sure some sort of permit or license is required.
Well, we wait for Governor Brown to come and do it for us.
Yeah.
You know, given that he's dead and rose again. The one problem with Governor Brown is he can't appear in daylight. No, you know what happens. You turn to ash.
Yeah.